Winter Yates was the most favored princess of the Great Yi dynasty. Following an accident where she fell into a lotus pond, she opened her eyes to find herself on the bustling, neon-lit streets of the modern world. Like a lost cub, panicked and helpless, she was picked up by Miles Payne, the crown prince of the capital circle. He took her home, taught her how to use electric lights and mobile phones, fed her foods she had never seen before, and indulged every joke she made out of unfamiliarity. At night, he was keen on exploring her body. In every corner of the villa, using various postures she was too shy to mention, he coaxed and tempted her into intimacy time and time again. Whenever she was lost in passion, he would bite her earlobe and whisper in a husky voice, "My little princess, why are you so fatal?" Over 3 years, he raised her from an ancient person who knew nothing of modern civilization into a daughter flower that could not live without him. Until one day, she accidentally saw an astronomical forecast on TV. The rare phenomenon of the 7 stars alignment would appear in 7 days. This was her only chance to return. Her heart was in turmoil. She wanted to go home, to return to the dynasty that belonged to her, but she couldn't bear to leave Miles Payne. He was so good to her. Perhaps she could discuss it with him and persuade him to go back with her. Harboring a secret hope and immense anxiety, she went to the private club Miles Payne frequented, wanting to talk to him. Just as she was about to knock on the door, she heard a conversation that instantly froze the blood in her veins. "Brother Wilde, seriously, the boys are all curious. Haven't you always liked Sister Ning? Why have you been tangled up with that girl of unknown origin, Winter Yates, for 3 years? Sister Ning? Winter Yates knew this person. Nina Townsend, his mother's best friend, who was a full 10 years older than him. Whenever Miles Payne mentioned her, his eyes would always become somewhat different. Miles Payne liked Nina Townsend. This realization pierced her heart like an ice pick, making her mind buzz. Before she could digest this information, another voice rang out with mockery. "You don't understand, do you? Didn't Brother Wilde get diagnosed with that little addiction before? The doctor said it could only be cured after having intercourse 10,000 times. What is Sister Ning's status in Brother Wilde's heart? She's like a pure and jade-like fairy. How could Brother Wilde bear to torment her? It just so happened he picked up Winter Yates, who claims to be an ancient princess. She's clean and easy to manipulate. Isn't she ready-made medicine? Once the 10,000 times are enough, and the addiction is gone, Brother Wilde can naturally pursue his sister Ning with a clean slate and a relaxed body." Holy SHT, so that's how it is, the previous man suddenly realized. "But Brother Wilde, you've been sleeping with Winter Yates for almost 3 years now. It must be thousands of times, right? Have you really not been moved at all?" The private room was quiet for a moment, save for the crisp sound of a lighter. Miles Payne leaned lazily on the leather sofa, his handsome brows and eyes blurred by the smoke. A moment later, he spoke lazily, his voice husky from the tobacco, yet like poisoned needles piercing Winter Yates' eardrums one by one. "Moved? Would you be moved by a plaything you picked up casually?" Plaything. Winter Yates felt her blood freeze instantly, even her breathing stopped. "But looking at that Winter Yates, she loves you so much honey is about to drip from her eyes. Her heart and eyes are full of you. If she finds out the truth and runs away heartbroken, won't your medicine be gone?" "Run?" Miles Payne curled his lips, his disdain and contempt unconcealed in his laugh. "Didn't she say she came from ancient times? Without me, where can she go? In this world, she only knows me. She can't move a single step. Apart from obediently staying by my side, does she have any other choice?" The private room instantly erupted in knowing laughter. Obviously, no one believed her story of time travel. Everyone regarded her as a scheming woman who clung to power and wove clumsy lies. Winter Yates' heart felt as if it were fiercely gripped by an invisible hand and then crushed, hurting so much she almost curled up. So, that was it. He had hypersexuality. He couldn't bear to touch the pure and flawless white moonlight in his heart, so he picked up her, a little fool of unknown origin, as a venting tool. It turned out his nightly insatiable demands were not because he loved her to the bone. But just to make up that ridiculous count for treatment, it turned out that the feelings she treated as a treasure, the sincerity she summoned the courage to deliver, were nothing more than a carefully designed exploitation and a joke for amusement in the eyes of others. Her heart ached so much she could barely breathe. This was the first person she had ever loved wholeheartedly, yet he had trampled her sincerity into the mud and crushed it. Tears rushed out, but she bit her lip firmly, daring not to make a sound. Seeing someone about to come out from inside, she suddenly turned around and ran away frantically with all her strength, as if fleeing a plague. The night wind scraped her cheeks, cold tears flowing recklessly. The bits and pieces of the past 3 years flashed uncontrollably in her mind, his gentleness when patiently teaching her to write her name. His doting when he ran across half the city just because she said she wanted to eat candied hawthorn. His deep affection when he whispered, "Ranran, my little princess," in her ear over and over again during every lingering night. Every moment that once intoxicated her now turned into sharp knives, torturing her repeatedly. It turned out it was all fake. She loved someone for the first time, but loved so heartbreakingly, so unbearably. She didn't know how long she ran. It wasn't until her strength was exhausted that Winter Yates stumbled back to the villa that had carried her 3 years of illusory happiness. The empty house was cold and devoid of human warmth. She walked into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and let the warm water wash over her body, as if this could wash away all traces left by Miles Payne. Tears mixed with the water flow. She wiped them dry forcefully and also wiped away the last trace of attachment to that man. She did not intend to tell him about the 7 stars alignment anymore. On the day of the 7 stars alignment, she would leave quietly and return to the world that belonged to her. From then on, separated by mountains and rivers, she would never see him again. After showering, Winter Yates forced herself to lie in bed. Physically and mentally exhausted, she soon fell into a deep sleep. She didn't know how long passed before she felt a burning body pressing down in her daze, a familiar breath mixed with the smell of alcohol enveloping her. It was Miles Payne. Like usual, without any extra foreplay, he directly began his movements. In the past, his sudden demands were always accompanied by sweet words like, "I missed you so much," or "I couldn't help it," making her blush and feel sweet. But now, she knew he just wanted to fill up that 10,000 count quickly, cure his illness, and pursue his true love. She opened her eyes abruptly and pushed him away forcefully. Miles Payne was immersed in it and was displeased at being interrupted. His voice was low and husky. "What's wrong?" "I don't feel well." Winter Yates turned her head, avoiding his kiss. Miles Payne chuckled low, his fingers igniting fires on her body, his tone carrying the habitual temptation that made her sink. "Uncomfortable, I see that down here. You are welcoming me quite a bit, aren't you?" Winter Yates' heart twitched. It was these words, this attitude, that made her mistakenly think he loved her deeply time and again. She suppressed the urge to push him away, her voice trembling imperceptibly. "No, I feel uncomfortable in my heart. I don't want to." Miles Payne still didn't take it seriously, assuming she was throwing a small tantrum. He leaned over to kiss her neck and coaxed, "Be good, don't fuss. It'll be over soon." His touch made her body stiff. A huge sense of humiliation and heartache swept over her. Finally unable to bear it, she questioned with a sobbing tone, "Because you don't love me, you never consider my feelings, do you? You just need to vent, right?" Miles Payne's movements paused abruptly. He raised his head, meeting her tear-filled eyes. He frowned. "Who has been talking nonsense in front of you? If I didn't love you, why would I sleep with you so many times? Why would I hold you in the palm of my hand and spoil you like a princess? I am a princess." Okay, you are the little princess." Miles Payne's tone carried obvious perfunctoriness. He pressed down again, his breath scorching. "My little princess, bear with it a little longer, it will be done soon." Done soon? Was he about to make up the 10,000 times? Winter Yates felt cold despair in her heart. She knew she couldn't escape tonight. Just as her heart turned to ashes and she prepared to endure it like a puppet, Miles Payne's phone, tossed on the bedside table, rang shrilly. His movements paused. He glanced at it impatiently, but when he saw the name on the caller ID, his face changed drastically. It was Nina Townsend. He withdrew immediately and answered the phone without hesitation, his tone filled with a nervousness and gentleness Winter Yates had never heard. "Sister Ning, you're back in the country? Wait there, I'll come immediately." He didn't even glance at Winter Yates on the bed. He quickly put on his clothes, grabbed the car keys, and rushed out of the bedroom. The sound of footsteps quickly disappeared at the top of the stairs. Winter Yates curled up on the messy bed, listening to the roar of the engine fading away downstairs, feeling only cold all over. She looked out the window. In the night sky, several stars were unusually bright, faintly showing signs of alignment. Soon, she would leave this man who deceived her body and mind forever, never to see him again. Miles Payne didn't return until noon the next day. He looked normal, even carrying a hint of relaxation, as if the unpleasantness and staying out all night yesterday had never happened. Awake, he walked up to her, his tone rarely softening. Something came up yesterday. Sister Ning came back from abroad. It wasn't convenient to catch a taxi at the airport, so I went to pick her up. Winter Yates lowered her eyes and didn't respond. Miles Payne continued on his own. Sister Ning heard I got a girlfriend and wants to meet you. Let's have lunch together, she has already booked the place. I don't want to go. Winter Yates' voice was dry. Miles Payne frowned, his tone taking on a dominance that allowed no refusal. Don't be willful. Sister Ning is very important to me. It's rare that she wants to see you. After speaking, without waiting for Winter Yates to refuse again, Miles Payne half coaxed and half carried her out the door. In the high-end Western restaurant, Nina Townsend had been waiting for a long time. She wore a decent Chanel suit, with exquisite makeup and a gentle temperament. She looked much younger than her actual age, her brows and eyes carrying the charm only a mature woman possesses. Seeing them, she stood up with a smile. This must be Winter, right? So beautiful. Standing with our Miles, you two are truly a talented man and a beautiful woman. She warmly held Winter Yates' hand, her tone affectionate. Although they were words of praise, Winter Yates keenly felt that Miles Payne's body beside her stiffened for an instant, and a fleeting look of unnaturalness passed over his face. She knew what he was thinking: talented man and beautiful woman. The beautiful woman in his heart had never been her, Winter Yates. After taking their seats, even though she was Miles Payne's official girlfriend, all his attention was on Nina Townsend. He pulled out her chair, laid her napkin, and introduced the dishes to her, meticulous and thoughtful. Nina Townsend also smiled and chatted, not only affectionately calling him Cub, but also occasionally bringing up funny stories from Miles Payne's childhood. Cub was so clingy when he was little. Once when I went out, he hugged my leg and cried terribly, insisting on following. He was only this tall back then, acting like a little adult, following behind me calling Sister Ning all day. He was extremely cute. Miles Payne listened quietly from beginning to end, a gentle smile on the corner of his mouth. Winter Yates watched the interaction between the two, feeling like a knife was twisting in her heart. She remembered one time when she unintentionally called him Ah Yi during a moment of passion. His face had darkened, saying he didn't like such sticky forms of address. But it turned out that when facing the address from his beloved, being called Cub, he enjoyed it thoroughly. Just then, while Nina Townsend was cutting her steak, the knife accidentally made a small cut on her fingertip, and beads of blood instantly seeped out. She hissed softly. Almost simultaneously, Miles Payne's expression changed. He suddenly leaned forward and unhesitatingly put her injured finger into his mouth. Winter Yates' breathing stopped abruptly as she looked at this scene in disbelief. What made her heart ache even more was that she clearly saw that because Miles Payne was sucking on Nina Townsend's finger, his body actually had a visible reaction, the fabric tenting in an awkward outline. He actually had such a direct reaction because of another woman's huge humiliation, and heartache drowned her like a tsunami. She gripped the knife and fork in her hand tightly, her knuckles turning white, to stop herself from losing composure on the spot. Miles Payne seemed oblivious. After carefully stopping the bleeding for Nina Townsend, he took out an exquisite velvet box and handed it over, his tone carrying an imperceptible doting. Sister Ning, I heard you like collecting jade recently. I specifically went to an auction to pick the best mutton fat jade for you. Nina Townsend smiled helplessly, her eyes shifting. You child, always spending so much money. For you, no price is too high. Miles Payne looked at her, his gaze focused. As expected of the cub I raised. From childhood to adulthood, you treat me the best. Nina Townsend accepted the gift, smiling gently, but her gaze seemingly inadvertently swept over the translucent green jade pendant hanging on Winter Yates' fair neck. But it looks like, after you got a girlfriend, I still can't compare to her. The water quality of this jade pendant you gave her is much better than mine. Winter Yates' heart tightened violently, and her hand subconsciously protected the jade pendant on her chest. This was personally put on her by her royal father during her coming-of-age ceremony. It was her only proof of being a princess from the Great Yi dynasty. Miles Payne immediately understood Nina Townsend's meaning. He turned to Winter Yates. "Ranran, Sister Ning likes your jade pendant. Take it off and give it to her." Winter Yates looked at him in disbelief, her hand protecting the jade pendant tightening. "No, this is the coming-of-age gift my royal father gave me. I cannot give it away." Miles Payne's face instantly darkened. He leaned in close, lowered his voice, carrying warning and impatience. "Winter Yates, it's fine if you tell these lies in private and I play along with you, but now you're still acting in front of Sister Ning. What does that look like? Be good, give the jade pendant to Sister Ning." "I won't give it." Winter Yates looked back at him stubbornly, her eyes holding a broken persistence. The atmosphere instantly stagnated. In the end, it was Nina Townsend who smiled and smoothed things over, saying she just mentioned it casually and telling Miles Payne not to make things difficult for Winter Yates. The matter seemed to pass, but Winter Yates could clearly feel the low pressure radiating from Miles Payne. If it were before, she would have been uneasy and tried every way to coax him to be happy. But now, her heart had gone cold. His joy and anger could no longer move her in the slightest. After the meal, it began to rain heavily outside. Winter Yates followed Miles Payne to the car. Just as she was about to open the door, he clicked the lock. "Take a taxi back yourself." His voice was cold, not looking at her. Winter Yates froze. Nina Townsend sat in the passenger seat and persuaded softly. "Miles, how can you do this? The rain is so heavy and this place is remote. How can Winter catch a taxi as a girl? Aren't you deliberately making things difficult for her?" Miles Payne sneered, his gaze sweeping over Winter Yates with deliberate cruelty. "I am deliberately making things difficult for her. Who told her to be insensible today and make you lose face? This is a lesson for her. Miles, don't be like this. Winter is your girlfriend. So what if she's a girlfriend?" Miles Payne's voice rose, carrying an unquestionable dominance. "Even a girlfriend cannot be disrespectful to you, Sister Ning. Don't get involved in this." After speaking, he no longer looked at Winter Yates standing stiffly in the rain. He slammed on the accelerator, and the black sports car rushed out like an arrow leaving the string. The splashing mud and water drenched Winter Yates from head to toe. The cold rain mixed with mud made her instantly wretched. She stood blankly in place, watching the familiar black car disappear into the rain curtain, the pain in her chest almost suffocating her. Just because she made Nina Townsend lose face, he punished her in this way. She tremblingly took out her phone, wanting to call a car, but found she didn't know how to use that complicated ride-hailing app at all. She remembered when Miles Payne taught her before, she could never learn it and had anxiously asked him if he despised her for being stupid. What did he say back then? He rubbed her hair dotingly, his eyes so gentle they could drip water. "If the little princess knows everything, what use is the prince? Don't learn it. In the future, whenever and wherever, as long as you say the word, I will drive to pick you up." The words were still in her ears, but things had changed, and people were no longer the same. Tears mixed with the cold rain slid down, blurring the screen. She waited in the rain for a long time, but there wasn't a single empty taxi. Finally, she could only take off her high heels that were rubbing her feet raw. Barefoot, step by step, she walked toward the direction of the villa. The rain curtain was too heavy, blurring her vision. Just after walking a short distance, a blinding car light suddenly shot over. Accompanied by the sharp sound of braking, bang, a huge impact came. Winter Yates only felt her body lighten, severe pain instantly sweeping through her whole body, and her consciousness was quickly swallowed by darkness. When she regained consciousness, she was on a cold operating table. The shadowless lamp stung her eyes so she couldn't open them. She only heard the doctor's anxious voice beside her ear. "Have you notified her emergency contact?" The nurse's voice carried helplessness. "There is only one number in her phone. I just called, and the other party said he has very important things to do now and has no time to come. I said the patient was in a car accident and in critical condition, and the other party said let her wait, this is the lesson she deserves." Then he hung up and couldn't be reached again. "Are there any other contact methods?" "No more. It seems this person was the only one in her life." Winter Yates lay on the operating table. Even anesthesia couldn't numb the heart-rending pain coming from her heart. It turned out that when her life was hanging by a thread, he wasn't even willing to come and sign a paper. The doctor sighed. "Forget it, operate first. Human life is important." Before the cold sensation of the anesthetic injection pushed into her vein completely dissipated, Winter Yates' consciousness sank into a chaotic dream. She seemed to return to 3 years ago, the days when she was first picked up and brought home by Miles Payne. At that time, she was clumsy and dull, coming to a strange world. She didn't know how to use the thing called an electric light. After fumbling for a long time, she could only whisper to the empty wall, "Where is the candlestick?" She saw hot water gushing from the shower head for the first time, screamed in fright, retreated, and almost slipped. She was at a loss facing that small black block called a mobile phone, not even knowing the simplest way to answer it. And every time, Miles Payne would teach her patiently, over and over again. He never laughed at her clumsiness. He would only lean lazily against the door frame or on the sofa when she made a joke, his lips curving into an indulgent faint smile, his voice low and magnetic. "Little dummy, come here, I'll teach you." And their first time. Coming from the conservative Great Yi dynasty, she was both ignorant and afraid of matters between men and women. Yet he kissed her brows and eyes, coaxing her, tempting her. When she was lost in passion and her body bloomed completely for him, he bit her earlobe and whispered huskily, "Ranran, my little princess, you are finally mine." She drowned in the gentle net he wove, thinking this was love, a destiny spanning 1,000 years. But it was all fake. Her heart felt as if it were repeatedly pierced by countless fine needles. The pain made her curl up her body, even in the grogginess of anesthesia. As soon as Nina Townsend returned, all illusions shattered, leaving only her heart, scarred and battered. She didn't know how long passed before the surgery ended. Winter Yates woke up again to find herself lying in a silent ward, wrapped in gauze all over, aching piercingly with every movement. The ward door was gently pushed open. Nina Townsend walked in, pulling Miles Payne. "Winter, you're awake?" Nina Townsend looked concerned. "I've already scolded the cub. It was his fault. He shouldn't have treated you like that, causing you to get into a car accident." She nudged Miles Payne. "Go on, apologize to Winter." Miles Payne had no expression on his face and didn't move from where he stood. Nina Townsend put on a stern face. "Cub, do you remember what I told you? If you don't apologize, I will never talk to you again." This sentence seemed to grab Miles Payne's lifeline. The crown prince of the Payne family, who was high and mighty and unbridled in front of outsiders, actually compromised. He took a few steps forward, looked at Winter Yates, his tone flat. "It was my fault." Before Winter Yates could react, he immediately added, his tone carrying emphasis and warning. "But Sister Ning is the most important person to me. In the future, you cannot throw tantrums like this again and embarrass her. Otherwise, next time it won't be as simple as standing in the rain." Most important person, he admitted it personally. Winter Yates closed her eyes, her heart aching to the point of numbness. Seeing the atmosphere soften, Nina Townsend took out a thermos. "Winter, I made soup for you. Drink some to nourish your body." Winter Yates looked at the soup. With just one glance, she saw several things floating inside ingredients she was severely allergic to. She shook her head weakly. "No thanks, I won't drink it." Miles Payne's face darkened, thinking she was deliberately making things difficult again, and scolded. "Winter Yates, this is Sister Ning's kindness." "Don't be ungrateful." Winter Yates lifted her pale face, looked at him, her voice choking with desperate sorrow. "There are shrimp and perilla in it. I am severely allergic half a month ago. You instructed the household that these 2 ingredients must never appear in the house." Miles Payne froze abruptly, a flash of astonishment and embarrassment crossing his face. Nina Townsend immediately smoothed things over. "It's my fault. I didn't know Winter's dietary restrictions beforehand. Don't drink this soup. I'll go out and buy a fresh portion right now." As she spoke, she got up and left the ward. Only the 2 of them were left in the ward. Miles Payne rubbed his brow, his tone softening a little. "I didn't forget on purpose. I just thought you were throwing a tantrum again and wanted to embarrass Sister Ning. She really is very important to me." Winter Yates looked at him, her voice light as a feather. "How important?" Miles Payne answered without hesitation, with absolute certainty. "For her, I could give up my life." One sentence, like a final verdict, thoroughly extinguished the remaining weak flame in Winter Yates' heart. Just then, a nurse ran in panic-stricken. "Mr. Payne, it's bad, miss. Tang fell at the stairs and is bleeding a lot." Miles Payne's face changed drastically. He suddenly got up and rushed out. Because his movements were too urgent, he actually knocked over the bowl of soup Nina Townsend brought on the bedside table. Most of the scalding soup splashed onto Winter Yates' arm, exposed outside the quilt. "Ah!" Winter Yates screamed in pain, her arm instantly turning red. But Miles Payne didn't even look back, his figure disappearing at the door long ago. Winter Yates broke out in a cold sweat from the pain. She could only reach out with difficulty to press the call bell, but after pressing for a long time, no nurse came. Enduring the double pain of the burn and the car accident wounds, she struggled out of bed, wanting to go out and find a doctor. At the end of the corridor, the door of a VIP ward was surrounded by doctors and nurses. Miles Payne's tall and straight figure stood in the middle, exceptionally conspicuous. He was losing his temper at the group of white coats, his voice cold and terrifying, carrying an unquestionable threat. "I don't care what method you use, you must save her for me if anything happens to her. I want your entire hospital to be buried with her." Such rage and loss of control were for Nina Townsend. Her heart felt bitter. Unable to watch any longer, she turned and moved bit by bit toward the nurse's station, relying on her memory. Fortunately, there was an intern nurse left behind because she was young. Seeing the shocking burn on her arm and her pale face, the little nurse jumped in fright and quickly found burn ointment and gauze to help her dress the wound. Throughout the process, Winter Yates clenched her teeth without making a sound. How could physical pain compare to even 1/10,000th of the pain in her heart? When she finished dressing the wound and dragged her weak body back to the corridor, she happened to hear the doctor telling Miles Payne that Nina Townsend had lost too much blood. She had rare Rh-negative blood, and the blood bank inventory was insufficient. Miles Payne immediately rolled up his sleeves. "Draw mine, I am also Rh-negative." The following scene was imprinted in Winter Yates' mind like slow motion. She watched the nurse draw bag after bag of bright red blood. Miles Payne's face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye, but he still sat there stubbornly. "Mr. Payne, we can't draw any more. You have already exceeded the safe blood donation limit. If we continue, your life will be in danger," the nurse urged anxiously. But Miles Payne pushed her away, his voice trembling slightly from weakness, but carrying an unquestionable madness. "Draw, it doesn't matter if I die, but you must save Sister Ning alive for me. You must save her." Winter Yates stood not far away, watching his disregard for his own life. His words from earlier in the ward echoed in her ears again. "For her, I could give up my life." It turned out to be true. And what about her? When she was critically ill from a car accident and needed a family member to sign, he only threw her a sentence. The lesson she deserves. To love or not to love, the distinction was so clear. She smiled until tears flowed from her eyes, smiled until her bones hurt. In the following days, because all doctors and resources were prioritized to guarantee Nina Townsend's safety, Winter Yates could only take care of herself, dragging her weak body after the car accident to change dressings, eat, and wash. Once, she heard two nurses gossiping in whispers outside the door. "Hey, what is the relationship between that Miss Tang in VIP room 1 and Mr. Payne? Mr. Payne treats her boundlessly well. He almost went into shock from drawing blood that day, and has been guarding her every step of the way these past few days, responding to every request Miss Tang makes. She shouldn't be the girlfriend, right? Isn't Mr. Payne's official girlfriend living here in room 3? But, sigh, Mr. Payne has never come to see this Miss Yates even once these past few days. The day before yesterday, I saw Miss Yates struggling to change her dressing alone, the wound almost splitting open. I went to ask Mr. Payne if he could spare a doctor to help, and ended up being roared back at, saying all doctors must prioritize Miss Tang. Sigh, what a mess." Winter Yates leaned against the door, listening to these discussions, her heart aching to the point of numbness. On the day of discharge, she saw Miles Payne personally pick up Nina Townsend to return to their villa. Nina Townsend leaned in Miles Payne's arms, her face still a bit pale, smiling softly at Winter Yates. "Winter, I'm sorry, I'll have to disturb you too for a while. Once my injury heals, I'll leave immediately." Miles Payne immediately interrupted her, his tone carrying unquestionable defense. This is also your home. You can live as long as you want. No one can drive you away." Winter Yates looked at them, looking at this place she once thought was home for her and Miles Payne, now grandly occupied by the person he truly held in his heart, and smiled sadly. In the days that followed, she truly and clearly experienced Miles Payne's affection for Nina Townsend. Because Nina Townsend said, "I want to eat crab roe soup dumplings from the east side of the city." He would drive across half the city early in the morning to buy them. He would patiently accompany Nina Townsend to watch those art films he used to scoff at, not daring to complain even if he fell asleep watching. When Nina Townsend took a nap, he would carefully cover her with a blanket and guard by her side, his eyes so gentle they could drown a person. So, this was what it looked like when he truly loved someone. It wasn't just about going to bed. Winter Yates' heart had ached until it was numb. Like a transparent ghost, she lived in the space shared by Miles Payne and Nina Townsend, watching the intimacy flowing between them that she could never intervene in. Until Nina Townsend's birthday. Miles Payne held a grand and luxurious birthday party for Nina Townsend. Before the party started, he took out an exquisite gift box containing a haute couture dress flown in specially from Paris. "Sister Ning, happy birthday." Nina Townsend opened the box, surprise flashing in her eyes, and a gentle smile spread across her face. "Cub, thank you, I like it very much." She took the dress into the fitting room. After a while, her voice came from inside. "Winter, are you outside? Can you come in and help me zip up the back? It seems stuck." Winter Yates was about to answer and step forward, but Miles Payne suddenly reached out to block her. "Your injury hasn't healed yet. What if you pull the wound with big movements?" His excuse was high-sounding, but his eyes flickered slightly. "I'll go." After speaking, he brooked no argument and pushed open the fitting room door directly walking in. The door wasn't closed tightly, leaving a crack. Winter Yates stood rooted to the spot. Through that crack in the door, she could vaguely see the situation inside. "Why are you here?" Nina Townsend's slightly surprised voice came. "Winter's wound isn't fully healed. I'll help you." Miles Payne's voice was deep. "All right." Nina Townsend seemed a bit helpless, yet with a hint of indulgence. "Anyway, you were raised by me too. It's just embarrassing letting you see my ugly figure." "How could that be?" Miles Payne immediately retorted, his tone carrying an unquestionable seriousness. "Sister Ning's figure is the best I've ever seen." Nina Townsend chuckled lightly, with a hint of teasing. "Better than Winter's." Outside the door, Winter Yates' heart contracted violently. Through the crack, she saw the roots of Miles Payne's ears turn red at a speed visible to the naked eye. He stepped closer, almost pressing against Nina Townsend's back, his voice suppressed extremely low, carrying a forbearing, husky arousal. How can she compare to you?" At that moment, Winter Yates only felt a chill rush from the soles of her feet straight to the top of her head. Her blood ran cold. She couldn't watch any longer. She retreated stumbling, her heart feeling fiercely gripped by an invisible hand, hurting so much she could barely breathe. An hour later, the banquet officially began, filled with fragrant clothes and shadows, guests exchanging toasts. As the protagonist, Nina Townsend circulated among the guests, her smile gentle and decent. She personally cut the huge birthday cake and distributed it to the guests one by one. When she walked toward Miles Payne holding a plate with mango mousse cake, Winter Yates blurted out almost subconsciously, "He can't eat this. He is allergic to mangoes." As soon as the words left her mouth, she regretted it. Nina Townsend paused, then looked at Miles Payne with some embarrassment, her smile apologetic. "Look at me, forgetting about this. Winter is indeed thoughtful to remember so clearly." Winter Yates felt bitterness in her heart. This wasn't being thoughtful. It was just that in the past 1,000+ days and nights, because of deep love, she had carved all his preferences and taboos into her bones. But at this moment, she wished she had never remembered. Miles Payne's gaze lingered on Winter Yates' face for a moment, complex and indiscernible. Then, he actually reached out directly, took the plate of cake from Nina Townsend's hand, and under Winter Yates' astonished gaze, scooped a spoonful and put it into his mouth. "Miles," Nina Townsend exclaimed, wanting to stop him. "Aren't you allergic? Spit it out quickly," but Miles Payne swallowed it, looking at Nina Townsend with focused eyes, even carrying a trace of stubborn madness. "It doesn't matter. I'll just take an allergy pill later." He paused, his voice low but clearly transmitted into everyone's ears present. "As long as it is given by you, even if it is poison, I will eat it." Nina Townsend was stunned, looking at the undisguised deep affection and determination in Miles Payne's eyes. She finally just smiled helplessly, and with a hint of doting, reaching out to gently touch his hair. "Silly cub." And Miles Payne, the crown prince of the Payne family who was unruly and uncompromising in front of outsiders, now behaved like a tamed large dog, lowering his head slightly and meekly allowing Nina Townsend to stroke him, the blush on his ears not yet completely faded. Winter Yates watched this scene, her heart feeling like it was being sliced. He once said he hated people touching his head the most, feeling it was provocative and disrespectful. It turned out he didn't hate being touched. He just hated being touched by someone he didn't love. For the rest of the time, Winter Yates clearly felt Miles Payne's gaze following Nina Townsend. When seeing Nina Townsend chatting happily with a dashing gentleman, and the man even leaning over to whisper in her ear, the air pressure around Miles Payne instantly became terrifyingly low. He downed a glass of strong liquor violently, his fingers exerting force until the knuckles turned white. The next second, with a crisp crack, the glass in his hand was crushed by him's scarlet liquor mixed with blood dripped from between his fingers. Yet he seemed unable to feel the pain. He stood up abruptly, without even glancing at Winter Yates beside him, and left the banquet hall with an air of hostility. Winter Yates didn't want to stay any longer either and got up to go to the restroom. In the corridor on the way back, she encountered Miles Payne leaning against the wall, obviously drunk. His eyes were blurry, and his cheeks flushed an abnormal red. Winter Yates wanted to pretend not to see him and walked past quickly with her head down. However, just as she brushed past him, Miles Payne suddenly reached out and pulled her tightly into his arms, his scorching breath sprayed on the hollow of her neck, carrying a heavy smell of alcohol. "Sister Ning?" His voice was husky and blurred, heavy with nasal tones, obviously mistaking the person. "Don't smile at him like that. I will go crazy." Winter Yates' body stiffened abruptly, her heart feeling instantly torn apart. 10 years. He held her tighter, as if to knead her into his bones and blood, his voice carrying suppressed pain and grievance to the extreme. "I'm FC-king like a fool, watching you circle among different men. Every time you get close to me, talk to me, I get hard until it hurts, yet I can only behave and call you Sister Ning. Just now, I really wanted to kill him, and then lock you up. Lock you where only I can see." His voice carried a near paranoid madness, yet was so fragile it was startling. "Wait for me a little longer, okay? Soon, I can confess to you, then we will be together forever. Okay?" Every word was like a poisoned dagger, stabbing fiercely into Winter Yates' heart, then churning cruelly. It turned out that deep in his heart, he hid such a surging and shameful love. It turned out all his abnormalities, all his loss of control, were only for Nina Townsend. Then what did she, Winter Yates, count for? Enduring tremendous grief and dizziness, she used all her strength to push him away fiercely, then stumbled and ran toward the outside of the hotel, as if chased by a flood or wild beasts. Just as she rushed out of the hotel gate into the garden, she heard exclamations coming from the artificial pool. Someone fell into the water. Winter Yates looked toward the sound and saw Nina Townsend, struggling and splashing in the pool. She didn't have time to think. Even though her heart was cold as ash, the kindness in her bones prevented her from leaving someone to die. She knew how to swim. Almost instinctively, she took off her high heels and jumped into the freezing pool. She struggled to swim to Nina Townsend, hugged her from behind, and dragged her toward the shore with difficulty. Just as she managed to push Nina Townsend to the shore so she could grab the edge, a piercing cramp suddenly came from Winter Yates' own calf. A cramp. Help. Help. Winter Yates instantly lost her balance, choked on several mouthfuls of water, and sank again along with Nina Townsend, who hadn't managed to climb up completely. She struggled desperately, shouting for help. Soon, a familiar figure rushed over like a cheetah. It was Miles Payne, however. His gaze swept over the water surface, and he unhesitatingly and precisely swam toward Nina Townsend, who was still splashing. He grabbed her firmly and lifted her onto the bank. From beginning to end, he didn't spare a glance at Winter Yates, who was struggling desperately in the water and about to drown. The cold pool water poured into her nose, bringing suffocating pain, but nothing compared to the overwhelming despair and chill in her heart at this moment. She watched Miles Payne carefully lay Nina Townsend on the ground, anxiously leaning over to give her artificial respiration. So focused, so nervous. She could no longer hold on, and her consciousness was completely swallowed by darkness. Waking up again, she was in a hospital bed. Miles Payne stood by the bed, his face gloomy. Seeing her open her eyes, instead of concern, he questioned her overwhelmingly. "Winter Yates, you clearly know how to swim. Why didn't you pull Sister Ning up in time? You almost dragged her down with you." Winter Yates opened her mouth, wanting to explain that her calf had cramped at that time, but Miles Payne didn't give her a chance at all. "I know I neglected you recently because of Sister Ning, and you have grievances in your heart." His tone was cold, carrying an unquestionable condemnation. "But how can you joke with her safety and life?" Winter Yates looked at him. All explanatory words were stuck in her throat, finally turning into a deadly silence. He had already sentenced her in his heart. No matter how much she said, it would only be quibbling. Seeing her say nothing, Miles Payne assumed she knew she was in the wrong and admitted it by default. He rubbed his brow irritably. "Take care of yourself. Sister Ning was frightened. I have to go accompany her." After speaking, he turned and left without any reluctance. Winter Yates lay on the hospital bed, staring at the pale ceiling, her heart numb beyond pain. On the day of discharge, she bumped into Miles Payne coming to pick up Nina Townsend at the hospital entrance. Nina Townsend affectionately held Miles Payne's arm. Seeing Winter Yates, she smiled and thanked her. "Winter, thank you so much for that day. Otherwise, I might have drowned in there." Hearing this, Miles Payne beside her was somewhat dissatisfied. "You only thank her, not me?" Nina Townsend laughed involuntarily, looked at Miles Payne dotingly, and reached out to rub his hair. "All right, I thank you too, my savior." Saying that, she stood on tiptoes and kissed Miles Payne lightly on the cheek. Miles Payne froze instantly, his ears turning red rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye, his eyes filled with disbelief and a trace of hidden ecstasy. Seeing his pure boyish appearance, Nina Townsend smiled even more gently. "What's wrong? Didn't you ask me to thank you? When you did something well in childhood, didn't I reward you like this?" Miles Payne's Adam's apple rolled, and he actually couldn't say a word, only his ears getting redder. He looked away somewhat unnaturally, glancing at the silent Winter Yates beside him. His tone returned to its usual indifference, as if to cover up his loss of composure just now. "There is a family banquet at the Payne house today. You come with me to attend." Winter Yates instinctively wanted to refuse, but the words were swallowed back on the tip of her tongue. Just because she suddenly remembered that today was exactly the day the Seven Stars alignment phenomenon would appear, and when she originally traveled here, the place she fell was in the hidden garden near the Payne Manor, picked up by Miles Payne, who happened to be attending a family banquet. To go back, she probably had to return to the origin. So, she suppressed the resistance in her heart and nodded silently. Arriving at the antique-style old residence, Miles Payne took Winter Yates to see his parents first. Father and Mother Payne liked Winter Yates very much, especially Mother Payne, who held her hand asking about her well-being, and even took off the heirloom jade bracelet with excellent water quality from her own wrist on the spot, wanting to put it on Winter Yates' hand. "Auntie, this is too precious. I can't accept it." Winter Yates hurriedly refused. Since she had decided to leave, she couldn't accept this heavy gift representing recognition and inheritance. "Take it, child. This is a little token of Auntie's heart." Mother Payne's attitude was firm. Just then, guests arrived, so she hurriedly went to entertain them. Holding the heavy jade bracelet, Winter Yates felt it burning her hand. She planned to find a chance to return it to Miles Payne after the banquet. Taking advantage of the lively banquet, she quietly left her seat, searching for the ancient well in her memory in the huge backyard of the old residence. But she didn't find the ancient well. Instead, she ran into Nina Townsend on a narrow path. Winter Yates didn't want trouble. She nodded politely at her and wanted to bypass her to leave. "Stop!" Nina Townsend called out to her. Winter Yates paused and looked back at her. Nina Townsend's gaze fell on the verdant jade bracelet on her wrist. The originally gentle smile vanished instantly, replaced by an undisguised contempt and coldness, completely different from her usual gentle demeanor. She sneered, "Winter Yates, don't think that just because you're wearing the Payne family heirloom, You are really the future mistress of the Payne family. Don't you know in your heart who Miles likes? He will ask for this bracelet back for me sooner or later." Winter Yates' heart felt pricked by a needle, but she felt it was more ridiculous. She spoke calmly, her voice without a ripple. "You know he likes you?" "Of course I know." Nina Townsend looked at her disdainfully, her tone carrying showing off. "The cub's affection for me is so obvious he can't hide it. Since the day I returned, every look he gives me, every word he says to me, everything he does for me, tells me he loves me, loves crazily, loves humbly." Winter Yates' heart felt soaked in bitter water, aching with astringent pain. She supported herself to remain calm and ask the doubt in her heart. "Since you know, why don't you accept his pursuit?" Nina Townsend seemed to hear a funny question. She stroked her carefully styled hair temples, her tone carrying a condescending calculation. "There is a 10-year gap between us, and I am the sister he grew up watching. If I let him get it too easily, how would he cherish it? Men, especially someone standing at the top like Miles, think what they can't get is the best. Naturally, I have to leave him hanging, string him along. When the time is ripe, I will naturally accept him." She paused, looking at Winter Yates mockingly. "As for you, don't think he likes you that much. While I was abroad these 3 years, which time did he video call me without doing it behind your back? For my birthday, which gift wasn't carefully selected by him, even canceling dates with you to deliver it to me? When he saw me talking to other men, which time did he not get insanely jealous and then go find you to vent? Winter Yates, you are just a tool he uses to quell his desire for me." Winter Yates' face gradually turned pale. "So that was it. So for these 3 years, those sweet dates suddenly canceled, his occasional absent-mindedness, his sudden passion and demands. Behind them all was Nina Townsend." Seeing Winter Yates' instantly pale face and teetering figure, Nina Townsend smiled satisfactorily. She issued a final ultimatum. "So, be smart and leave Miles yourself. You simply don't deserve him, and don't dream of things that don't belong to you." Winter Yates closed her eyes. When she opened them again, only a dead silence remained in her eyes. She gave a soft MMH. She meant that she would leave today and disappear completely. However, Nina Townsend misunderstood, thinking she didn't believe it and was unwilling to leave. A flash of ruthlessness passed through her eyes, deciding to make Winter Yates recognize reality completely. "It seems you won't shed a tear until you see the coffin." Nina Townsend sneered. "Fine, then I'll let you see clearly that compared to me, you are worthless in Miles's heart," before her voice fell. While Winter Yates was completely unguarded, Nina Townsend actually suddenly took a fierce step back. Her body leaned back, accompanied by a shrill scream, and her whole person fell straight down the steep stone steps behind her just then. Miles Payne rushed out from the corner like a whirlwind, Sister Ning, seeing Nina Townsend lying under the stairs with her forehead broken and bleeding. His face turned iron blue instantly. He looked up fiercely, his scarlet eyes staring dead at Winter Yates standing on the stairs. "Winter Yates, why did you push her?" "I didn't," Winter Yates explained hurriedly. "Miles, don't blame Winter," Nina Townsend gasped weakly, her head covered in blood. "It was my carelessness. I made her angry." Miles Payne's face instantly became gloomy enough to drip water. The look he gave Winter Yates was full of disappointment. "Winter Yates, I didn't expect your mind to be so vicious just because Sister Ning said a few words you didn't like to hear. You laid such a heavy hand. How can someone like you enter my Payne family's door? Someone come?" He sternly ordered the servants who rushed over upon hearing the noise. "According to family law, drag her to the ancestral hall for me and give her 20 lashes, let her wake up properly." "Miles Payne, I really didn't push her, believe me once," Winter Yates shouted desperately. But Miles Payne didn't believe it at all. Holding Nina Townsend, he left hurriedly without looking back. Winter Yates was roughly dragged to the gloomy and cold ancestral hall by 2 burly servants. The whip struck her back with the sound of breaking wind, tearing skin and flesh, causing piercing pain. Severe pain swept through every nerve in her body. She curled up on the ground, her body convulsing uncontrollably, her consciousness drifting in a sea of intense pain. She gritted her teeth, neither begging for mercy nor crying out, just stubbornly remembering this humiliation and pain. When the 20 lashes ended, the servant coldly dropped a sentence. "Miss Yates, kneel here and reflect. Wait for the young master to come back and deal with you." After speaking, they locked the door and left. How could Winter Yates reflect? She still had to go home enduring the severe pain on her back. She struggled to get up and rammed forcefully into the seemingly sturdy, but actually dilapidated wooden door. The latch was actually knocked open by her. She took a deep breath, pushed open the door fiercely, and enduring the intense pain, stumbled and ran towards the remote garden where the ancient well might exist in her memory. Not good. Miss Yates ran away. Soon, servants discovered her. Exclamations and chasing footsteps sounded behind her. Faster, finally, in the most remote corner of the backyard, she saw the ancient well half concealed by weeds, and at this moment, above the night sky, 7 stars were aligning in a straight line in a strange way. Emitting a hazy and mysterious brilliance, 7 stars alignment. The time had come. Miss Yates, don't go there. Danger. The chasing servants saw her rushing straight toward the ancient well and were scared out of their wits, screaming in terror. Quick call the young master. Miss Yates is going to commit suicide. Tell him to come back quickly. Suicide. Winter Yates stopped by the well, looked back at the panic-stricken servants, then looked toward the brightly lit direction of the old residence, the corner of her mouth hooking into a mournful, yet relieved arc. Miles Payne, I am not committing suicide. I am going home. When you return, nothing will remain here. Farewell forever. 1 second before the servants pounced to grab the corner of her clothes, she leaped into the bottomless ancient well facing that brilliant galaxy. The cold well water instantly wrapped around her. A huge suction force came from the bottom of the well, time and space seemingly twisting and rotating. Before losing consciousness, she seemed to hear the servants' heart-rending, terrified screams from the mouth of the well. Miss Yates! But it was already too late. Opening her eyes again, what came into view was the familiar carved canopy bed top, the air filled with faint sandalwood scent. The maid guarding the bed saw her wake up and threw herself to the bedside in surprise, her voice carrying a sobbing tone. Princess, you finally woke up. You've been in a coma for 3 whole years. You scared this servant to death, Princess. She was back to her great Skylark. Winter Yates spoke, her voice hoarse and dry, her throat feeling like it had been rubbed with sandpaper. It's this servant. Skylark was incoherently excited, tightly holding her cold hand. Buddha bless ancestors bless you were in a coma for 3 whole years. The imperial physicians, even the imperial physicians said. This servant thought. As she spoke, she wept uncontrollably again. 3 years? She spent 3 years in the modern era, and here she had also slept for 3 years. Hurried and messy footsteps came from outside the hall, accompanied by the high-pitched announcement of the internal attendant. His Majesty arrives. Her Majesty the Empress arrives. The figure in bright yellow, and the figure in phoenix crown and robes, almost rushed into the inner hall. Ranran, my Ranran, the usually majestic royal father was now tearful, throwing himself to the bedside, his trembling hand touching her cheek, as if confirming whether she truly existed. Her royal mother hugged her directly into her arms, warm tears falling on her forehead hair. Child, my child, you finally were willing to wake up. Mother thought I would never wait for this day in this lifetime. Feeling the real and warm embrace of her royal father and mother, hearing their choked sobs of joy at regaining what was lost, Winter Yates felt like a lifetime had passed. Those 3 years in modern times, the traffic, the neon lights, Miles Payne's sometimes gentle and sometimes cold face, Nina Townsend's hypocritical smile, the cold rain, the bone-chilling pool water, the severe pain of whipping. Everything was like a long, twisted, heart-wrenching nightmare. Now the dream was finally over. She raised her hand and gently hugged her mother back. Her gaze fell on her slender arm. There, scalding soup had once poured over it, leaving a hideous red mark, but now only an extremely faint mark remained, as if reminding her of the reality of that absurd experience. The whip wounds on her back seemed to still ache faintly. That was the humiliation and despair Miles Payne personally ordered upon her. Miles Payne. This name swept across her heart, but could no longer stir up half a ripple, leaving only dead silence. That man, that world, along with the sincerity she delivered but was crushed into mud, were all thoroughly buried by her deep in that ancient well connecting 2 worlds. From now on, she was the most noble Princess Winter Yates of the Great Dynasty. She would never see that man named Miles Payne again, in life or death. Modern times, Payne Manor. What did you say? Jumped into the well. Miles Payne roared at the phone. He almost crushed the steering wheel in his hand. The sports car engine emitted a roar on the brink of its limit, drawing a dangerous arc in the night, driving crazily toward the suburban old residence. He had just settled Nina Townsend, whose forehead was merely grazed but who acted fragile and pitiful, into the best private hospital, and was preparing to go back to deal with Winter Yates, whom he had ordered to be whipped and locked in the ancestral hall. He was unusually irritable in his heart. On one hand, he was angry at Winter Yates because of Nina Townsend's injury. On the other hand, he felt an indescribable uneasiness, as if something was losing control. The call from the old residence butler came at this time, his voice terrified and incoherent. Young master, it's bad Miss Yates, She jumped into the well. The words, jumped into the well to commit suicide, struck Miles Payne like thunder, making his mind go blank for a moment. Suicide? Winter Yates would commit suicide. That woman who was tenacious as a weed when he picked her up, whom he had pampered for 3 years although reliant on him, still had a stubbornness in her bones, would kill herself because of 20 lashes. Impossible. This must be her new trick, a play she put on to punish him for punishing her for Nina Townsend. But when he rushed back to the old residence like a madman, rushing to the ancient well in the most remote corner of the backyard, all he saw was a group of ashen-faced, trembling servants and the dark, bottomless hole of the well. Where is she? Miles Payne grabbed the collar of the servant closest to him, his eyes splitting with rage. Where is Winter Yates? Young master. We couldn't hold her. Miss Yates, she jumped right down. The servant was scared out of his wits, crying and shouting. We shouted, saying you would be back soon, telling her not to do anything rash. But she smiled at the sky and then just jumped. Miles Payne abruptly released him and threw himself at the edge of the well, screaming hoarsely into the bottomless darkness. Winter Yates, come out. Winter Yates, did you hear me? I order you to come out. From the bottom of the well came only his hollow echo, carrying cold dampness, spiraling upward. An unprecedented panic instantly seized Miles Payne's heart, more terrifying than any failed business negotiation or enemy provocation. He frantically ordered the bodyguards who followed him in. Go down, and fish her out for me. I want to see her alive. Or, see her corpse if she's dead. Professional search and rescue personnel arrived quickly, descending the well with ropes, while large pumps rumbled to drain the water. Miles Payne stood by the well like a stiff statue, staring dead at the well opening, as if in the next moment, that woman who made him angry and hateful would be brought up dripping wet and pitiful, and then he would make her pay the price for this excessive farce. Today, however, apart from mud, water plants, and a few broken stones at the bottom of the well, it was empty. No Winter Yates, nothing at all. She just vanished into thin air from a drained ancient well. Search. Miles Payne's eyes were crimson, like a trapped beast thoroughly enraged. He smashed his fist fiercely on the well curb. His knuckles broke skin and bled instantly, but he felt no pain. Use all power citywide, nationwide airports, stations, docks, all surveillance, even if you have to turn the earth over. Find her for me. She must be hiding. She dares to play me. He refused to accept the suicide explanation, and even less could he accept the result of vanishing into thin air. This must be Winter Yates' carefully planned revenge. Her fiercest resistance against him punishing her for Nina Townsend, she thought this could force him to bow his head. Keep dreaming, returning to the villa that was once filled with Winter Yates' presence, but was now terribly cold and empty. Miles Payne habitually shouted at the empty living room, Ranran, I'm back. Answering him was only a dead silence. He pulled off his tie irritably, walked upstairs, and pushed open the bedroom door. The air seemed to retain the faint scent of the shower gel he personally chose for her. The bed was a bit messy. He walked over and saw a few strands of her smooth, long hair left on the pillow. Miles Payne reached out, carefully picking up those few strands of hair. The cold touch was like an electric current, instantly penetrating his forced composure and anger. He suddenly clenched his fist, gripping those few hairs tightly in his palm, and slammed his other hand fiercely against the hard wall, making a dull thud. Why? Why did it turn out like this? He just wanted to teach her a lesson, let her know who was the person she couldn't disobey, so she wouldn't dare to be disrespectful to Nina Townsend in the future. He never thought she would leave in such a resolute way. No, impossible, she couldn't leave him. She personally said that in this world she only knew him, and without him, She couldn't move a single step, exhausted physically and mentally. He still had to go to the hospital to deal with Nina Townsend's injury. Nina Townsend's injury wasn't serious originally, but she stuck a piece of gauze on her temple, appearing even more delicate and pitiful. She stayed in the top VIP ward of the private hospital, controlled by the Payne family. Seeing Miles Payne walk in with an air of hostility, she immediately frowned weakly, her voice carrying fearful grievance. "Cub, you came? I feel so dizzy. The doctor said there might be a slight concussion." If it were before, Miles Payne would definitely be distressed, sit by the bed to comfort her gently, and blame everything on Winter Yates. But at this moment, his mind was full of the suffocating emptiness by the ancient well and the deadly coldness in the villa. He interrupted Nina Townsend irritably. "Enough, Sister Ning, the doctor said you just have a superficial wound. Winter Yates has already been punished. What more do you want from her? If I hadn't made her go kneel in the ancestral hall, she wouldn't have run," he said the word run with extreme difficulty. He still didn't want to admit the possibility of suicide. Stunned by his sudden rebuke, Nina Townsend looked up at him in disbelief. "Miles, are you blaming me?" "She pushed me." "I said enough." Miles Payne abruptly pulled back the arm she was holding, his gaze sweeping over her coldly. "Before things are clarified, I don't want to hear this anymore." This was the first time he had rebutted Nina Townsend so severely for Winter Yates. Even he himself was stunned. Nina Townsend looked at the flash of irritability and alienation in his eyes, her heart sinking fiercely, her gaze instantly becoming deep and unfathomable. To clarify the truth about the pushing, Miles Payne retrieved the surveillance video from the backyard of the old residence. The surveillance system at the old residence was perfect. Although the angle was a bit tricky, it happened to capture most of the scene at the top of the stairs. Miles Payne sat in the study, staring tightly at the screen. The screen clearly showed Winter Yates and Nina Townsend stood at the top of the stairs, seeming to have a brief conversation. Then, at the moment when Winter Yates was completely unguarded and even trying to turn sideways to leave, Nina Townsend suddenly took the initiative to stumble back, lost her balance, and fell down the stairs, and in that instant, Winter Yates clearly subconsciously reached out trying to pull her. But grabbed empty air, it wasn't Winter Yates who pushed, it was Nina Townsend who fell down herself. She even slandered Winter Yates. Miles Payne felt struck by lightning. He froze in the chair, his blood seemingly freezing instantly. The surveillance footage was like a heavy hammer, smashing the filter of gentle, kind, sensible he had always held for Nina Townsend. He remembered his indiscriminate rebuke at the time, remembered the 20 lashes of family law he ordered to be executed, remembered the desperate and desolate look in Winter Yates' eyes when she was dragged away. "I didn't push her, believe me." Once. That was what she shouted then, but what about him? Did he believe her? He only listened to Nina Townsend's seemingly weak, but actually vicious accusation, regret, anger, self-loathing. All kinds of emotions were like a surging tide, instantly drowning him. He stood up abruptly. The chair tipped backward due to the huge force, making a harsh sound. Like an out-of-control beast, he rushed back to the hospital. Bang, the ward door was pushed open vigorously. Nina Townsend, whose dressing was being changed by a nurse, jumped in fright. Miles Payne walked directly to the bed and shoved the phone screen in front of Nina Townsend. It was the freeze frame of the surveillance the moment she actively leaned back and fell. His voice was so cold it seemed like ice. "Sister Ning, tell me, what is this?" Nina Townsend's face turned pale instantly. Her eyes flickered in panic, but then tears surged even more. She grabbed Miles Payne's sleeve, crying miserably. "Cub, listen to my explanation. I didn't mean to wrong her. I was just confused for a moment." Looking at this face that appeared incredibly strange and even somewhat ugly at this moment, hearing her pale and feeble defense, the fortress named Deep Love that Miles Payne had built for 10 years collapsed in a corner with a bang. For the first time, he felt that this face that once haunted his dreams looked so hypocritical, so tiresome. He flung her hand away fiercely, his eyes piercingly cold. "Confused for a moment? Your momentary confusion almost killed a human life, Sister Ning. How could you be such a person?" After speaking, he ignored her pale face and desperate eyes, turned around, and left resolutely. This time, besides anger in his heart, there was an indescribable emptiness and sorrow. At the same time, news of searching for Winter Yates came back one after another. Mr. Payne, the city's transportation hub surveillance has been checked. No travel records of Miss Yates were found. Mr. Payne, hotels, guest houses, homestay systems have all been checked. No check-in information for Miss Yates. Mr. Payne, Miss Yates' bank cards and credit cards have no transaction records. Mr. Payne, we asked everyone Miss Yates might know, including community property management, supermarket clerks. No one has seen her recently. Messages of no such person found piled up like cold snowflakes on Miles Payne's heart. How could a person disappear so thoroughly in modern society? Left no electronic traces, didn't use a single cent he gave her. An absurd thought one he had scoffed at for 3 years, uncontrollably grew from the bottom of his heart again. Was what she said true? Did she really come from ancient times? So, she didn't commit suicide, nor did she hide, but went back. This thought made him shudder, yet it was like the only glimmer of light in the darkness that could explain this weird phenomenon. If it was really like this, then where was he going to find her? That obscure Great Yi dynasty, in which crevice of time and space was it? In the days that followed, Miles Payne seemed to become a different person. Pushing all company affairs to the vice president, he locked himself in the villa, accompanying wine bottles all day. Traces belonging to Winter Yates in the villa were wiped away by time bit by bit, yet were incredibly clearly carved in his mind. He walked into the study drunkenly, wanting to find something to distract himself, but accidentally knocked over an inconspicuous cardboard box in the corner. That was a box he had someone give her for sundries when Winter Yates first arrived. Later, she seemed to cherish it very much. Compelled by some strange force, Miles Payne opened the cardboard box covered with a thin layer of dust. The contents inside instantly sobered him up considerably. On top of the box was a small transparent bag containing a few dried and blackened, candied hawthorn sticks. Next to it was a crumpled movie ticket stub. It was the first movie he took her to see, a childish cartoon. She laughed like a child at that time. There was also a sketch of her profile he drew casually on a sticky note during a meeting. The lines were rough, but he didn't expect she secretly kept it and flattened it carefully. Underneath was a diary with a lock that looked like it was used by children. The password lock was simple. He tried her birthday, incorrect. He tried the day he picked her up, and it opened. The handwriting in the diary was crooked at first, like a child learning to write, then gradually became neat and delicate. Full pages recorded trivial and real joy related to him. November 7th, Sunny. Ayi taught me how to use the magical tool called mobile phone today. I learned for a long time before I got it. He didn't despise me for being stupid and patted my head. His hand was so warm. February 8th, Rain. I wanted to eat candied hawthorn. Ayi drove around for a long time to buy it. He said the little princess can have whatever she wants. I am so joyful. April 19th night, Ayi did that again. He said I am his little princess, his life. Although it is very shameful, but if it is him, I am willing. If it can always be like this, it's fine not to go home. June 22nd, Ayi seems unhappy. Is it because of Sister Ning? I want to be more obedient and not make him angry. The last diary entry stopped a few days before the 7 stars alignment appeared. The handwriting carried an imperceptible tremor. Saw the star forecast, return possible in 7 days. Heart very chaotic. Would Ayi be willing to return to Great Yi with me? Miles Payne's hand holding the diary trembled violently, his knuckles turning white from the force. These immature yet sincere words were like red-hot branding irons, searing fiercely onto his heart. She never seemed to care much about the jewelry and fine clothes he gave her. Yet she treasured these trivial, insignificant, even garbage like small items he gave casually with such solemnity. She treated his occasional charity as treasure, carved his hypocritical, deep love into her bones, and even thought about giving up the only chance to go home and staying in this strange world, just because he was here. And what about him? How did he repay this sincere, unreserved heart? He treated her as medicine to cure his illness, as a plaything he could discard at any time. For the sake of his white moonlight, he hurt her and humiliated her time and again. And finally, because of her unwarranted fault, personally subjected her to whipping, forcing her to a dead-end. Miles Payne suddenly pressed the diary tightly against his chest, as if only this could alleviate the piercing regret and pain. Nerves numbed by alcohol were now terrifyingly sober. Every detail he ignored in the past 3 years, every look full of love and reliance from Winter Yates, turned into the sharpest blades at this moment, slicing him apart. Just then, the confidant he sent to deeply investigate Nina Townsend's overseas background returned, bringing a more fatal blow. A thick stack of photos and documents was placed in front of Miles Payne. The documents showed that Nina Townsend's private life abroad for many years was extremely dissolute. She circulated among several tycoons and politicians at the same time, exchanging her body for resources and money. Her reputation was long rotten. She returned to the country this time to approach Miles Payne only because she was getting older and couldn't get by abroad. She set her sights on Miles Payne's current net worth and the residual sibling affection he had for her, wanting to find a top-tier fall guy. She even bribed a so-called psychologist in advance to fabricate the lie that Miles Payne had sex addiction. She originally wanted to induce Miles Payne to come to her for treatment, but didn't expect that because Miles Payne cherished her, he found Winter Yates as medicine by accident. Looking at those unsightly photos and irrefutable evidence, Miles Payne's worldview collapsed completely. The white moonlight he cherished for 10 years, worshipped like a god, and was even willing to give his life for, turned out to be a carefully woven scam from the inside out. A vain, dissolute, deeply scheming liar, and for this liar, he personally drove away the Winter Yates who was full of him and pure as crystal, absurd, laughable, tragic. Miles Payne fell to the floor, leaning against the cold wall, looking at the scattered treasures belonging to Winter Yates and the dirty evidence revealing the truth about Nina Townsend. He suddenly burst into loud laughter. The laughter was manic and desolate. As he laughed, tears surged out. He lost. He lost completely. He lost the only person who truly loved him, and also saw clearly how stupid and ridiculous the deep affection he held for 10 years was. And that girl he lost, where was she now? Alive or dead? Did he still have a possibility to find her back? Despair, like endless darkness, swallowed him completely. Miles Payne's world collapsed entirely. Nina Townsend's true colors were like a heavy hammer, smashing his 10-year filter. And the trivial items and diary left by Winter Yates, every word and sentence was a torture to his blindness. Regret was like a poison vine, wrapping around his heart day and night. He could no longer deceive himself. Winter Yates' disappearance was absolutely extraordinary. He had to face that most absurd possibility. He used his connections to find the top astrophysicist in the country. In the office piled with books and star charts, he asked with a hoarse voice, "Professor, is it possible for the 7 stars alignment phenomenon to trigger space-time anomalies, like time travel?" The old professor pushed his glasses and shook his head rigorously. "Mr. Payne, from the perspective of modern physics, space-time travel currently belongs to the realm of science fiction. The 7 stars alignment is merely a visual phenomenon of planets running to specific angles. The gravitational superposition effect is negligible, insufficient to tear space-time." Miles Payne's heart sank, but the professor changed the subject, flipping out a yellowed ancient book. However, in some unverified ancient legends and unofficial histories of the East and West, there are indeed records of people or objects disappearing or appearing strangely under specific celestial phenomena. The next observable 7 stars alignment, according to calculations, is in about 1 year. 1 year, a glimmer of light suddenly burst into Miles Payne's gray eyes. He still had a chance returning to that empty, cold apartment. He searched frantically through Winter Yates' belongings like a madman. In a small velvet bag, he found the jade pendant. She never left her body. The jade pendant he had forced her to give to Nina Townsend, which she had protected with her life. He took the jade pendant to an authoritative ancient jade appraisal institution. Several white-haired old experts gathered around the jade pendant, examining it repeatedly with magnifying glasses, showing extremely shocked expressions on their faces. "Mr. Payne, this is incredible," the chief expert's voice trembled. "The carving on this jade pendant is the long-lost, hair-thin carving technique, and the jade material is top-grade Hessian yellow jade. Looking at this patina and texture, it's at least an object from 2,000 years ago. Moreover, this decorative style doesn't belong to any historical dynasty we know, but looks like the style of a certain ancient Yi kingdom missing from historical records. Ancient Yi Kingdom Jade Pendant 1,000-year-old artifact Winter Yates didn't lie, she really was a princess. She really came from ancient times. This realization was like a thunderbolt, striking Miles Payne out of his wits. Huge panic and overwhelming regret drowned him instantly. How he used to mock her, force her, and trample her sincere heart under his feet. He returned to the car in a daze, sitting in front of the steering wheel for the whole night until the sky turned white. From that day on, Miles Payne changed. He pushed away all unnecessary social engagements and disbanded that group of so-called brothers who only knew how to eat, drink, and play. He locked himself in the study, frantically consulting all fragments of unofficial history about the Yi dynasty, learning obscure ancient texts, and identifying those strange characters. He lost weight rapidly, his eyes gloomy, radiating an aura that kept strangers away, like a walking corpse existing only for a certain obsession. At the same time, he dealt with Nina Townsend swiftly and violently. He made public the evidence of her dissolute life overseas and the surveillance video of her framing Winter Yates. The Tang family's stock price plummeted, quickly going bankrupt. Nina Townsend fell from the high and mighty, white moonlight to a laughingstock spat upon by the whole internet, her reputation ruined, her end miserable. But he did all this not for justice, but more like a liquidation, a sacrifice for his stupid past. He cleared all the filth around him, just to be able to pursue the person he lost more cleanly. He was preparing for a desperate gamble on the 7 stars alignment 1 year later. Great Yi Imperial Palace, Sunbright Palace. It had been nearly a year since Winter Yates returned. Her former naive innocence was replaced by a calm composure. Deep in her eyes was a transparency after experiencing the vicissitudes of life. She was still the apple of her royal father and mother's eye, but no longer a daughter flower relying on others. She ingeniously integrated the little knowledge she learned in modern times into life. For example, suggesting promoting hand washing with hot water and storing food separately in the palace to reduce epidemics. Presenting an improved double-entry bookkeeping method to the Ministry of Revenue, increasing efficiency. She only claimed she obtained it in a dream during the 3-year coma. The emperor was overjoyed, praising her for receiving divine revelation through misfortune. One day, the atmosphere in the imperial study was heavy. The water transport had been blocked for days. Southern tribute rice could not be transported north. Rice prices in the capital skyrocketed, and public resentment was rising. The emperor and several important ministers were at their wits' end. Winter Yates came to pay respects and stood quietly aside. After hearing the reason, she pondered for a moment and said, "Royal Father, your daughter recently browsed. Miscellaneous notes in dreams, there seems to be a method worth trying." She proposed borrowing the idea of modern segmented transportation and transit storage, suggesting setting up official warehouses at key nodes of water transport, changing from big ships to small ships, relaying section by section, and strictly investigating exploitation along the way. As her voice fell, the imperial study was silent. Several old ministers looked at each other, then light burst from their eyes. Although this plan was unheard of, upon careful thought, it pointed directly to the core of water transport maladies and was highly feasible. Wonderful, the princess's plan is wonderful. The prime minister was the first to clap in praise. Just then, a clear and steady male voice sounded from behind the screen. "Your Majesty, Her Highness the Princess's strategy is far-sighted and hits the mark, impressing this foreign subject." Everyone looked over and saw a young man in black brocade robes with a tall and straight posture walking out slowly. His face was handsome, his brows carrying a natural noble air. It was the visiting Crown Prince of Northern Lynn, Victor Underwood. The Emperor laughed. "When did the Crown Prince arrive? Please sit." "This is my daughter Winter," making the Crown Prince laugh. Victor Underwood's gaze fell on Winter Yates, carrying undisguised appreciation and inquiry. This foreign subject has long heard that Princess Kang has a unique mind after waking up. "Seeing you today, you indeed live up to the reputation." He had heard many times about this princess solving palace problems and was curious. Now seeing her in person, her calm temperament and amazing insights moved his heart. Winter Yates nodded slightly in return, not saying much. Soon after, the emperor began to worry about Winter Yates' marriage. He repeatedly held palace banquets, nominally for flower viewing, but actually for selecting a son-in-law. Winter Yates' heart was as still as water, turning a blind eye to the young talents filling the seats, just going through the motions. However, a gaze followed her seemingly casually all along. It was that crown prince of Northern Lynn, Victor Underwood. He didn't curry favor deliberately like others. Instead, he often accidentally met her on the flower paths she passed, or played a desolate and distant tune on the zun not far away when she leaned on the railing looking into the distance. What he discussed was not romance, but strategies for governing the country and anecdotes from the border. His insights were unique, often making Winter Yates unable to resist listening. Once, Winter Yates almost slipped in the Imperial Garden. Victor Underwood reached out to support her virtually in time, then politely retreated. The palace maid whispered in exclamation, "Princess, that is the Crown Prince of Northern Lynn, why is he here?" Winter Yates also felt strange. With his status, he shouldn't be so. Finding an opportunity, she asked directly, "What advice does Your Highness the Crown Prince have?" Victor Underwood looked at her, his gaze frank and burning. "I dare not give advice. I admire the princess and wish to welcome you with the position of Crown Princess of Northern Lynn, seeking the friendship of Qin and Jin between our two countries." Winter Yates was stunned. Political marriage? She had just left a wolf's den. Her heart was already dead to love. How could she enter a cage again? She declined politely. "The Crown Prince overpraises, Winter dares not accept. Winter has no intention of marriage, only wishing to serve at my parents' knees." Victor Underwood didn't force it, only saying, "No matter, I can wait." However, developments were unexpected. After a palace banquet, Winter Yates returned to her sleeping palace, suddenly feeling unbearably hot all over, her consciousness blurring. She had been drugged with a very strong aphrodisiac almost simultaneously. The palace door was pushed open. Victor Underwood stumbled in, his face flushed, eyes blurry, obviously also having fallen victim bang. The palace door was locked dead from the outside. Winter Yates felt cold in her heart. Instantly understanding this was her royal father's facilitation plan, she curled up in despair, thinking Victor Underwood would take advantage of the situation. However, holding on to the last shred of reason, Victor Underwood saw the large vat used for raising lotuses in the corner of the hall and suddenly lifted her by the waist. Placing her into the cold vat, water the piercing chill temporarily suppressed the drug's effect. "Princess, pardon the offense, bear with it." His voice was husky and broken, but he retreated behind the screen, turning his back to her. Winter Yates suffered in the cold water, hearing suppressed groans and the sound of sharp objects cutting skin coming from behind the screen. When the drug's effect receded slightly, she walked out of the water vat weakly, bypassing the screen, but was shocked by the scene before her. Victor Underwood sat against the wall, his arms covered with deep and shallow knife marks, dripping with blood. A small pool of blood accumulated on the ground. His face was pale, but he still tried to force a comforting smile at her. "Don't be afraid, the blood, dirtying your eyes. You, why do this?" Winter Yates' voice trembled. Victor Underwood looked at her, his eyes deep and serious. "Because what I want is the princess's willingness. Not taking advantage of someone's precarious position, only increasing resentment. If obtained by despicable means, how is that different from a beast?" This sentence, like a beam of light, shone into Winter Yates' frozen heart lake. She thought of Miles Payne's deception and coercion, then looked at this man before her who would rather hurt himself than desecrate her, feeling a mix of emotions. She didn't need illusory love, but if a marriage alliance could benefit the country and the people, this upright crown prince who respected her might be the best choice. At least it was an equal transaction, not a unilateral plunder. After the drug effect passed completely, the palace door was opened. The emperor rushed over anxiously. Winter Yates looked at her royal father, then at the weakened Victor Underwood beside her due to blood loss who still kept his back straight. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Your daughter is willing to marry the Crown Prince of Northern Lynn." The emperor was overjoyed, immediately issuing a decree to bestow the marriage and selecting an auspicious day for the wedding. Modern times, 1 year later. Night of the 7 stars alignment, celestial phenomenon changing. Backyard of Payne Manor, the ancient well deep and dark. Miles Payne wore simple and neat black clothes, tightly holding that warm jade pendant. This was his only token and thought. He took one last look at this world that brought him pain and attachment, and jumped into the freezing well after intense dizziness and tearing sensation. He fell heavily onto hard ground. The blinding sunlight and noisy human voices woke him instantly. He struggled to get up, and found himself on an antique street. In the distance was a majestic palace complex, the plaque boldly reading, "Ye Palace." He really traveled to Winter Yates' world ecstasy, drowned him, ignoring the surprised gazes of pedestrians around. He rushed toward the imperial palace like a madman, relying on the little fighting skills learned in modern times and a ruthless energy, risking his life. He actually broke through several palace gate guards, stumbling into the palace hall where a grand banquet was being held. Inside the hall, silk and bamboo music was pleasant, singing and dancing peaceful. Civil and military officials lined up on both sides, the emperor and empress sitting high. And most striking was the woman sitting below the emperor, wearing a phoenix crown and robes, dressed in bright red wedding attire. Her brows and eyes were picturesque, her temperament cold, beautiful beyond compare. It was the Winter Yates he dreamed of. Beside her sat a man in black clothes with extraordinary bearing, the Crown Prince of Northern Lynn, Victor Underwood. Today was actually her wedding send-off banquet. Ranran Miles Payne was both panicked and excited. Breaking through all obstructions, he threw himself into the center of the hall, his eyes staring dead at Winter Yates. "I finally found you. Come back with me. Let's go back." The whole audience was in an uproar. Music stopped. Dance ceased. Guards unsheathed swords, instantly surrounding Miles Payne. At the moment Miles Payne broke in, Winter Yates' pupils contracted fiercely, her fingers holding the wine cup tightening slightly. But in just an instant, she recovered to a dead water calm. She raised her eyes, her gaze sweeping indifferently over that man who looked wretched and mad, as if looking at a completely strange intruder. She turned to the displeased emperor on the high seat, her voice clear and cold, without a ripple. "Royal father, who is this madman? From where? Your daughter does not know him." The words "does not know" were like the sharpest ice picks, fiercely piercing Miles Payne's heart. He widened his eyes in disbelief, struggling and screaming crazily. "Ranran, it's me. I am Miles Payne. Look clearly, we were together for 3 years. Did you forget our home? Forgot us?" He began to incoherently recount bits and pieces of modern times, mobile phones, cars, electric lights. To the ancients, these words were simply fantastic tales, confusing the public with heresy, presumptuous. The emperor flew into a rage. Where did this demon come from, daring to talk nonsense here, disturbing the holy driver, and sullying the princess's reputation? Take him down. Guards swarmed up, pressing Miles Payne firmly to the ground. Victor Underwood watched all this calmly from beginning to end. Only now did he slowly stand up, bowing to the emperor. "Your Majesty, this person acts madly and dresses strangely. I fear he is not of kind sort. Today is the princess's auspicious day. It is not suitable to see blood. It is better to imprison him in the heavenly dungeon first, interrogate strictly, and then make a decision." The emperor nodded. "We will follow the crown prince's words." Miles Payne was dragged up roughly. He turned his head desperately, his crimson eyes staring dead at Winter Yates, shouting hoarsely, "Ranran, you lied to me. You clearly remember you hate me, right? You can hit me, scold me, kill me. Don't say you don't know me, I beg you." Winter Yates sat upright in place, looking down at the swaying wine in her cup. From beginning to end, she didn't look at him again, as if his hoarse shouting was just an irrelevant wind blowing outside the hall. Victor Underwood glanced lightly at the dragged away Miles Payne, his eyes deep, then turned to Winter Yates, saying gently. The princess was frightened. Winter Yates looked up, meeting his gaze, and shook her head gently. Order was restored in the hall, and joyous music played again, as if the farce just now had never happened. Only Miles Payne's desperate roar came faintly from afar, finally dissipating between the thick palace walls. In the dark and damp, heavenly dungeon, the air was filled with the smell of mold and blood. Miles Payne was chained to the stone wall with thick iron chains, wearing ragged prison uniform covered in whip marks and stains. The jailer's torture didn't make him submit. Instead, pain made him clearer. There was only one thought in his mind. See Winter Yates once, tell her personally that he knew he was wrong, he regretted it. He didn't know how long passed before footsteps and the jailer's respectful voice came from outside the cell door. "Your Highness the Princess." Miles Payne looked up abruptly, his heart beating wildly. The cell door creaked open, and a light shone in. Winter Yates stood in the halo, wearing a lake blue palace dress, the skirt embroidered with intricate interlocking lotus patterns, surrounded by pearls and emeralds. Her face was cold and exquisitely beautiful, adding a few points of unattainable grace compared to memory. Only those eyes that used to be filled with reliance and admiration for him were now calm and waveless, looking at him as if looking at a dead object. "Ranran?" Miles Payne's throat was dry, his voice terribly hoarse. He struggled to get close, iron chains clanking. Winter Yates raised her hand, signaling the accompanying palace servants to wait in the distance. She walked forward slowly, stopping a few steps away from the cell door, maintaining a distant and safe distance. "Miles Payne," she spoke, her voice cold, without any emotional fluctuation, "you trespassed into the inner palace and disturbed the holy driver. According to law, you should be beheaded. This princess comes here out of consideration that you and I once had a karmic bond of an illusory dream to send you off on your last journey." "Illusory dream?" Miles Payne seemed stung by this word, shaking his head fiercely. Tears surged out instantly, mixing with the dirty blood on his face, looking wretched. "It wasn't a dream, Ranran. That was all real. I was a bastard. I was blind." He clutched the cold prison bars, his fingers turning white from force, confessing incoherently. "I investigated. Clearly Nina Townsend is just a liar. I didn't know. I didn't know you really were a princess. I didn't know you would leave. Ranran, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Forgive me this once, okay? Let's go back to our home. I will definitely treat you well in the future, only treat you well." He cried like a lost child. His former pride and dominance were gone, leaving only humble begging. Winter Yates listened quietly, without any emotion on her face. Only when he cried himself hoarse did she speak lightly. Every word hit Miles Payne's heart like ice beads. "Miles Payne, you are mistaken. What you can't forget is not loving me, but simply unwillingness to lose a plaything that once belonged to you." She paused, the corner of her mouth hooking into an extremely faint satire. "Your confession is meaningless to me. During the 3 years by your side, I gave my all, yet it wasn't worth a single fake tear from Nina Townsend. Now, I am the Princess Kang of Great Yi, about to marry the Crown Prince of Northern Lin. He treats me with respect and promises me the country. You to me are already a past dream. Why persist?" She looked at his instantly pale face and finally said, "Seeing you today, the dust has settled. I hope you behave yourself, do not entangle further, only increasing laughter." After speaking, she turned resolutely, her skirt dragging on the ground. Without any reluctance, she walked toward the light outside the cell. "No, Ranran, don't go, I beg you." Miles Payne hit the cell door like crazy, the iron chains almost embedded into his bones. He let out a desperate roar toward the direction she disappeared, like an injured beast. "Ranran, you can't treat me like this. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong." Answering him was only the muffled sound of the cell door closing heavily, and the gradually fading, cold footsteps. Darkness swallowed him again, more biting than before. Miles Payne was designated a serious criminal for confusing the public with heresy and trespassing into the palace. The Emperor was furious and intended to execute him as a warning to others. When Victor Underwood learned of this, he didn't immediately plead for mercy, but secretly ordered the jailers not to use unauthorized torture. He always felt that deep in this madman's eyes hid an indescribable obsession related to Winter Yates. A few days later, a farewell banquet was held in the palace for the Northern Lin diplomatic mission, which was also the last large palace banquet before Winter Yates' marriage. Silk and bamboo strings, cups exchanged, a scene of peace. However, a sudden change occurred midway through the banquet. Several people suddenly erupted from a team of dancers, cold light flashing in their sleeves, pouncing straight at Winter Yates sitting below the Emperor, obviously prepared, with a clear target: protect the Emperor, protect the princess. The hall was instantly in chaos. The guards hurriedly engaged the enemy, but the assassins were agile and ruthless, unable to be stopped for a moment. Seeing a poisoned short sword about to pierce Winter Yates' heart, in a split second, a black shadow lunged from behind a side hall pillar, using his body to shield Winter Yates tightly. The sound of sharp blade entering flesh was clearly audible. It was Miles Payne. Unknown how he escaped. He had been lurking nearby all along, the short sword pierced deeply into his back, blood instantly staining his ragged clothes red. He grunted, but held Winter Yates tighter, looking up at the assassin, his eyes fierce as a wolf, actually scaring the assassin into a momentary pause. In this fleeting moment, Victor Underwood had swept over like a swift wind, throwing the wine cup in his hand to precisely knock down the assassin's weapon. Then a soft sword slid out of his sleeve, sword light like a ribbon, instantly subduing the remaining few assassins. The scene was quickly controlled. Winter Yates was held tightly in Miles Payne's arms, clearly feeling his body trembling and warm blood soaking her luxurious palace dress. She looked down at this man who had once hurt her deeply, now disregarding his life for her. A complex emotion surged in her heart: shock, confusion, and an indescribable bitterness. "Summon the Imperial physician quickly," Victor Underwood ordered calmly, stepping forward to gently help Miles Payne aside and check his injury, frowning slightly. "Lung injured, needs immediate treatment." Miles Payne lost too much blood, his face pale as paper, yet he still looked stubbornly at Winter Yates. His lips moved, seemingly wanting to say something, but finally fainted weakly. Winter Yates watched him being carefully carried away by guards, her fingertips trembling slightly. That night, Victor Underwood came to Winter Yates' sunbright palace. Candlelight flickered in the hall, reflecting her slightly pale face. "You were frightened today." Victor Underwood's voice was gentle. Winter Yates shook her head, was silent for a moment, and finally spoke. "Your Highness, regarding that person today, I perhaps should tell you something." Weighing her words, she blurred the modern experience into a long and painful dream. "In a dream, I drifted to a foreign land, knew a person, once thought. It was a destination, but it was just flowers in a mirror and moon in water, suffering all hardships. That person today is the entanglement from the dream." Victor Underwood listened quietly to the end without asking for details. He just walked up to her, gazing at her with deep eyes, then slowly held her slightly cool hand. "Winter," he called her name, his voice low and firm. "Whether that dream was real or illusory, bitter or sweet, it has passed. From now on, your reality is guarded by me. Your future is written together with me." He leaned forward slightly, looking level with her, carrying unquestionable solemnity. "Remember, you are Winter Yates, the most dazzling Princess Ka-Ang of Great Yi, and will be the only wife of Victor Underwood in this life, the future Empress of Northern Lin. No one can bully, no one can fail you." These words, like a warm current, slowly poured into Winter Yates' long frozen heart field. Looking at this calm and wise man before her who gave her total respect and promise, true emotion appeared in her eyes for the first time. Because of his merit in saving her, Miles Payne was spared the death penalty, but could not escape punishment. Although the Emperor spared his life, he couldn't let him leave. Finally, he decreed to strip him of all demon titles, forcefully keeping him in the palace as a lowest-rank sword-bearing guard, belonging to the miscellaneous duty team guarding the palace gardens, for strict monitoring. After recovering from his injuries, Miles Payne put on a Course Guard uniform and was assigned to patrol areas far from the core palaces. The massive difference in status and position made him taste the fickleness of the world. But he endured it because he could still occasionally catch a glimpse of Winter Yates from afar. However, every sight was a new torture. He saw Victor Underwood walking side by side with Winter Yates in the Imperial Garden. Victor would patiently explain the habits of a rare flower to her. Winter Yates listened attentively, eyes carrying the light of seeking knowledge. He saw them playing chess in the pavilion. Victor played calmly, Winter frowned in thought, occasionally revealing a shallow, real smile because of a brilliant move. He saw Victor telling her interesting but irrelevant things from memorials, discussing with her. Winter could also give unique insights. Their conversation was an equal exchange and spiritual compatibility. This scene of mutual respect and soul resonance was far more piercing to Miles Payne than the interactions full of calculation and ambiguity between him and Nina Townsend back then. He clearly realized for the first time that he had never given Winter Yates such respect. By his side, she was just a canary kept in a cage, needing to learn how to please him, not develop herself. The so-called favor he gave was essentially condescending charity and control. Once, he heard officials from the Ministry of Works discussing how to improve water wheel efficiency. He thought of some mechanical principles from modern times. His heart moved, feeling he finally had a place to be useful. He stayed up for several nights drawing a rough improvement sketch, wanting to find a chance to present it to the managing eunuch, hoping it might reach Winter Yates' ears. However, before he found a chance, he heard that Her Highness the Princess had mentioned a wondrous concept called keel waterwheel to the Crown Prince of Northern Lin, utilizing gears and chains, far exceeding existing waterwheels in efficiency. Victor Underwood praised this greatly and had already ordered skilled craftsmen to start trial production. Miles Payne clutched that sketch he treasured, standing in a remote palace corner, listening to the discussions about the princess's natural intelligence coming from afar, feeling his face burning as if slapped in public. His bit of modern knowledge, in front of Winter Yates, who truly adapted to this era and integrated innovation with it, appeared so ridiculous and clumsy. He thoroughly became a superfluous, incompatible joke. He could only wander deep within the palace walls like a ghost, helplessly watching the treasure he lost bloom with increasingly dazzling light beside another man who truly understood and cherished her. And this contrast reminded him every minute and second of his past stupidity and present powerlessness. Life inside the palace walls was a torture, like a dull knife cutting flesh for Miles Payne. Like a wandering soul, wearing the coarsest guard clothes, patrolling in corners far from the core palaces, his only hope was occasionally catching a distant glimpse of that familiar, yet strange silhouette. Every time he saw Winter Yates walking side by side with Victor Underwood, talking and laughing, that spiritual fit and equal respect were like needles sticking in his heart, repeatedly reminding him of his past stupidity and present baseness. He finally understood what exactly he had lost. Not a plaything, but a soul he once possessed but didn't know how to cherish. An opportunity arrived one afternoon. Winter Yates was feeding fish alone by the remote lotus pond in the Imperial Garden, accompanied only by 2 personal maids. Miles Payne, taking advantage of a shift change, rushed over regardless of everything, blocking her path. "Princess," his voice was hoarse, eyes covered in red veins, staring tightly at her. The maids immediately stepped forward to block him, but Winter Yates waved her hand, signaling them to step back a few paces. She looked at this haggard man in ragged clothes before her, her eyes calm and waveless, as if looking at an irrelevant stranger. "Miles Payne," she spoke first, her tone distant, "what is the matter?" "Is it?" Miles Payne's Adam's apple rolled, his voice trembling with despair. "Is it that no matter what I do, even if I give you my life, you won't turn back?" Winter Yates looked at him quietly, her gaze penetrating him, seemingly seeing somewhere very far away. After a long time, she spoke lightly, her voice light as wind, yet carrying resolute determination. "Yes." She paused, continuing, every word incredibly clear. "Miles Payne, some wounds are deep to the bone and will never heal. Some people once missed are missed for a lifetime. Between you and me, it ended completely the moment you chose to believe her and doubt me. Now you are a guard of Great Yi, I am a princess about to be married off. Each being well is the best ending." After speaking, she didn't look at him again, turning to the maids. "Return to the palace." Miles Payne froze in place, watching her resolute departing back. The last shred of hope was extinguished by her own hands, and his blood ran cold. Soon it was the day of the royal autumn hunt. Banners fluttering, horses neighing, royal nobility and civil and military officials gathered at the hunting ground. As the prospective crown princess, Winter Yates was also on the viewing platform. The hunting reached its climax as everyone chased a stag deep into the dense forest. Suddenly, terrified shouts and beastly roars came from the forest. A huge black bear, bursting out from who knows where, frantically broke through the guard line, pouncing straight toward the viewing platform. The target clearly Winter Yates, sitting in front. Sudden change occurred. Guards unable to react in time, seeing the bear paw about to strike with a bloody wind. Careful. A figure like an arrow leaving the string pounced from the side. Using all strength to push Winter Yates away fiercely, it was Miles Payne unknown, when he had broken free from supervision and sneaked into the hunting ground. The bear paw slapped solidly on his back. The sound of cracking bones made teeth ache immediately after. The bear's mouth bit down viciously, tearing a large chunk of flesh from his shoulder. Miles Payne screamed miserably, blood spurting wildly, Yet he still hugged one of the black bear's hind legs tightly, buying precious escape time for Winter Yates. "Release arrows, quick, release arrows," Victor Underwood ordered calmly. Guards fired arrows together, finally shooting the black bear dead. The scene was in chaos. Winter Yates was helped up by maids, soul still in shock, gaze falling on the dying figure in the pool of blood. Miles Payne lay there, covered in blood, his back almost smashed, shoulder mangled, breath weak, obviously unlikely to live. The Imperial physician hurried forward to check, shaking his head. Miles Payne's unfocused gaze struggled to focus on Winter Yates' face. He tremblingly raised a blood-stained hand, seemingly wanting to grab something. Winter Yates hesitated for an instant but finally squatted down and held his cold hand. "Ran," his lips moved, voice weak, almost inaudible, blood constantly gushing from his mouth. "I'm sorry, it was my fault." Using his last strength, he said intermittently, "And I really fell in love with you, didn't lie to you." This sentence, incredibly clear, carrying all sincerity at death's door, was his first, and perhaps last, sober, unreserved confession. After speaking, his hand loosened, eyes slowly closing, breath becoming weaker. Winter Yates held his gradually cooling hand, looking at his terrible injuries. Finally, a trace of extremely complex fluctuation passed through her eyes: shock, emotion, but mostly a settled sorrow. She let go, stood up, and said calmly to the waiting head Imperial physician, "Try your best to save him." In her tone, love and hate could no longer be heard, leaving only a faint pity born of humanity. Whether he lived or died to her meant no more ripples. The Imperial Hospital did their utmost, using countless precious herbs, and finally pulled Miles Payne back from the gates of hell. But his injuries were too severe: spine damaged, meridians broken. Although his life was saved, he was left permanently disabled, his body broken. His meager martial arts were completely lost, becoming a weak, powerless invalid. Considering his merit in saving her, the Emperor granted him permission to continue recuperating in a side hall of the Imperial Hospital within the palace. His identity remained that of the lowest guard, only he could no longer perform any duties. Time passed, and the wedding date of Winter Yates and Victor Underwood arrived as scheduled. On this day, the capital was decorated with lanterns and festoons, the streets empty of people as everyone turned out to watch. The welcoming procession stretched for miles, gongs and drums shaking the sky, salutes firing in unison. Winter Yates wore a complex and magnificent phoenix crown and robes, riding the 9-dragon phoenix carriage. Amidst the crowd of civil and military officials and the cheers of the whole city, she drove slowly toward the main palace hall. Dragging his sick and weak body, wearing that washed white old guard uniform, Miles Payne hid in an inconspicuous corner under the palace wall, watching from afar. He saw on the high city tower Victor Underwood wearing the crown prince's ceremonial robes, heroic and noble. Winter Yates stood by his side, her face under the phoenix crown bright and incomparably beautiful, glowing with a heartfelt happiness and peace he had never seen before. The two accepted the worship of 10,000 people, like a divine couple. At that moment, Miles Payne only felt a sharp pain in his chest, a sweetness in his throat, and actually vomited a mouthful of fresh blood. Holding the cold palace wall, watching those dazzling figures, he finally thoroughly understood that he had lost her forever. Not because she married someone else, but because she found true happiness, and that happiness was something he could never give in his lifetime. His heart, at this moment, truly died. The grand wedding lasted a whole day. As night fell, the palace was still brightly lit and festive. Taking advantage of the night, Miles Payne dragged his broken, sick body, moving step by step outside Winter Yates' wedding palace. He knew this was inappropriate, but he had one last thing to do. Winter Yates had just removed the heavy head ornaments and was preparing to rest. Hearing the report, she frowned slightly but still met him. In the outer room of the bridal chamber, she saw Miles Payne standing there, his face pale as paper, appearing even more desolate under the festive red candlelight. He looked at her, his eyes waveless, leaving only dead ashes. Trembling, he took out from his bosom the jade pendant kept close to his body, stained with his body warmth and dried blood, and handed it over, returning the item to its owner. His voice was hoarse, pulling out an extremely dismal smile. "I wish you happiness, After speaking, he didn't stay, turned around, and stumbled into the night outside the hall, his back desolate, as if he would dissipate in the wind at any time. Winter Yates held the regained jade pendant, which seemed to still retain a trace of bloody smell and desperate temperature. She was silent for a moment, then handed the jade pendant to her personal maid. "Put it away, no need to show it to others again." Winter Yates returned to Northern Lynn with Victor Underwood. Relying on the broad vision brought from modern times and accumulated wisdom, she quickly gained a firm foothold in the Northern Lynn court. She didn't interfere in politics, but subtly integrated advanced hygiene concepts and management methods into the harem and even the folk. She often had unique insights when assisting Victor Underwood in handling affairs, deeply respected by Victor and loved by Northern Lynn subjects. The two treated each other with respect, shared interests, and their feelings grew deeper day by day. She successively gave birth to intelligent princes and princesses for Victor Underwood, having a happy family. After Victor Underwood ascended the throne, she logically became the Empress of Northern Lynn, Mother of the Nation, joining hands with the Emperor to create Northern Lynn's Golden Age. Her life, after experiencing hardships, finally moved towards true fulfillment, and Miles Payne, after Winter Yates' grand wedding, vanished from the Great Yi Imperial Palace as if evaporated from the world. No one knew where he went, whether he was alive or dead. Many years later, modern times, backyard of Payne Manor. The ancient well was still deep, the rim covered with moss of time. A man with a stooped figure and frosted temples sat quietly on the stone pier by the well. It was exactly Miles Payne. He finally found a way, perhaps another 7 stars alignment or some other chance, and returned to modern times. But what came back was just a hollow shell. He became taciturn, his face no longer showing any of the arrogance of the past, only a dead silence remaining. He took over the family business, but only maintained operations, having no ambition for expansion. He never married, and there were no women by his side, as if all emotions were completely buried 1,000 years ago with that figure jumping into the ancient well. Every year, on the night calculated when the 7 stars alignment might appear, he would come to this ancient well alone, sitting desolately all night, watching the starry sky until dawn. No one knew what he was thinking. Perhaps he thought nothing, just using this way to mourn that completely lost, etched in bone past. Another year passed. Miles Payne, by an extremely accidental chance, attended a small academic salon about the ancient Silk Road. A scholar studying the history of ancient kingdoms in the western regions, while sharing some newly discovered fragments, mentioned a powerful dynasty 1,000 years ago named Northern Lynn, and their legendary virtuous empress. According to fragments of merchant notes, this empress was not a native of Northern Lynn, said to come from a more eastern mysterious ancient kingdom, Yi. She possessed superior wisdom, assisted the Northern Lynn emperor in creating a golden age. The couple was loving, and their children were all dragons and phoenixes among men. The scholar was still chattering about textual research details, but Miles Payne was fixed like a statue, the teacup in his hand trembling slightly, unaware even when tea splashed out. Yi, Northern Lynn virtuous empress, loving couple, intelligent children. Every word was like a key, unlocking the prison of his heart sealed for a long time. He seemed to see, 1,000 years ago, that woman he once possessed and lost, wearing the empress's luxurious robes, standing beside her true beloved, smiling brightly, eyes clear and firm, enjoying all the honor and happiness that should belong to her. Miles Payne slowly lowered his head, shoulders shrugging slightly, his face showing an expression that looked like crying yet laughing, complex and indescribable. Tears silently slid across his already aged cheeks. He murmured in a low voice, so light only he could hear, carrying endless relief and final surrender. "That's good. She lived well. That's good." Time was like a knife urging people to age with every cut. Miles Payne's later years were spent in that old residence in northern Beijing, which no longer had the luxury of the past, but appeared empty and gloomy instead. The Payne Group had long been handed over to professional managers, and he faded out of people's sight completely. His wealth remained staggering, but could not fill the abyss in his heart. The sword he took for the Great Yi Princess Winter Yates back then injured his lungs, leaving a serious underlying illness. As he aged, this old illness became increasingly fierce, turning into a coughing blood disease that kept him bedridden. Whenever it was cloudy and rainy, he coughed heart-rendingly, handkerchiefs often stained with dark red blood streaks, as if he wanted to cough out that debt spanning 1,000 years from the depths of his lungs bit by bit. There were no servants in the old residence, only an hourly worker who came twice a week responsible for cleaning and purchasing. He refused all visits, living like an isolated island. The place he stayed most often was the study. Under the glass plate of the desk, a yellowed and blurred photo was pressed. It was a silhouette he took casually with his phone when he took Winter Yates to the amusement park back then. Printed out, it had long faded. Beside it lay that jade pendant he brought back to modern times after traveling 1,000 years. The jade pendant had long lost its initial warm luster, becoming dull, the edges even showing traces of collision, just like his riddled heart. He often sat withered before the desk, rubbing the cold jade pendant with withered fingers, muttering to himself at it, cloudy eyes occasionally flashing a trace of illusory light. Ranran, it rained today. It rarely rains this hard in northern Beijing. Are you cold over there? Is there a draft in the palaces of Great Yi? Ranran, I dreamed of you again. Dreamed you were still in the villa, wearing that white nightgown, cooking hangover soup for me in the kitchen. You are still so beautiful, didn't change at all. Ranran. Yesterday on the street, I saw a girl whose back looked a bit like you, wearing a ponytail. I followed her for a long time, later found it wasn't. I really am old and muddled. Ranran, I regret it so much. If only. Neighbors occasionally could see this emaciated old man talking to the air through the fence, all shaking heads and sighing, discussing in private. That old man of the Payne family, afraid he's gone mad. Pitiful. Mad, perhaps. To him, the boundary between reality and illusion had long blurred. Only when pouring his heart out to this jade pendant could he feel a trace of false comfort, as if the person he lost never truly left. In the last few years of his life, he began to write. Not business documents, but page after page of handwritten manuscripts. With trembling, no longer powerful strokes, he recorded word by word. Recorded that bizarre modern street corner, how he picked up that panicked ancient girl. Recorded how he harbored secret selfishness, teaching her to adapt to this world, yet greedily possessing her. Recorded those bits and pieces in those 3 fake years that he once disdained, but now treasured like jewels her surprise when learning to use the electric light. Her small face wrinkling from the cold when eating ice cream for the first time, her dependent curl in his arms. Moore was recording his regret, like a blunt knife, repeatedly dissecting his own soul. He wrote how blind and heart-blind he was, how deceived by the hypocritical white moonlight, how he trampled a sincere heart into dust. He wrote of his futile pursuit after traveling 1,000 years, wrote of her piercingly cold eyes looking at him, wrote of the scene where she finally wore the phoenix crown and robes, standing side by side with her beloved, accepting the worship of thousands. The manuscript piled thicker and thicker, soaking between the lines with late tears and undissipating pain. The last page, the last line, he wrote extremely slowly, almost using up all his strength, the pen tip sinking deeply into the back of the paper. If there really is karma and reincarnation in this world, really is an afterlife. Ranran, let me find you. Let me tread over thousands of mountains and rivers, suffer all the bitterness in the world, just to beg for a reunion. Let me come to love you like life, spoil you into the bones. Okay? After writing this last sentence, he slumped back in the chair, coughing violently, fresh blood staining his cuff. He gazed at the gray sky outside the window, eyes filled with endless desolation and a plea humble into the dust. Time walked to a certain node. Miles Payne clearly felt life flowing rapidly out of this broken shell. The frequency of coughing blood became higher and higher, sometimes even coughing out small blood clots. He became extremely weak, lying in bed staring at the ceiling most of the time. He flipped through the old almanac, fingers rubbing repeatedly on a date. Another night of 7 stars alignment. It seemed a whole cycle away from his first crossing. He had a premonition that his end was approaching. That evening, he miraculously recovered some strength. He refused the hourly worker's suggestion to send him to the hospital for a checkup, only asking her to help him change into a neat, but long, ill-fitting, old suit, the style he loved to wear most when young. I'll go out for a walk. he said to the worried hourly worker, voice hoarse but calm. Leaning on a cane, step by step, he moved with difficulty to the backyard of the old residence. That ancient well carrying his life's joys and sorrows had long been sealed and filled during a municipal renovation many years ago. The well mouth was sealed with cement, covered with withered vines. Right by that sealed well, he found a fairly flat stone and slowly sat down. The afterglow of the setting sun stretched his shadow very long, appearing even more lonely. Night fell, stars lighting up gradually. He looked up, cloudy eyes trying hard to search the night sky. Finally, 7 brilliant stars in a mysterious trajectory slowly connected into a straight line. Cold, mysterious brilliance spilled down, shrouding him. At this moment, time and space seemed to twist again. He seemed to see through the aligned stars to 1,000 years ago in the magnificent garden of the Great Yi Palace. Winter Yates, the virtuous empress of Northern Lin, wearing graceful palace robes, temples slightly frosted, but face still gentle and beautiful. She was playing under the moon with several jade-carved grandchildren, her face overflowing with a calm and satisfied happy smile. Beside her stood Victor Underwood, similarly showing signs of age yet still majestic. The two looked at each other and smiled, tacit understanding without words. That was the stable and honored happiness he exhausted his life unable to give her. The picture flashed, and he seemed to see the busy modern street corner many years ago. That little princess, Winter Yates, who just traveled over, panicked like a lost cub, was standing blankly at the intersection, eyes full of fear for the unknown world. In the hallucination, young Miles Payne stood not far away, watching the helpless her. The old him sitting by the well, and the young self in the hallucination, figures seemed to overlap. Old Miles Payne, using the last trace of strength, slowly and tremblingly reached out a withered hand toward that panicked girl in the hallucination. On his wrinkled face, he tried to squeeze out an incredibly difficult, yet relieved smile, cloudy tears sliding down deep wrinkles. With almost inaudible breath to that void phantom, and also to his riddled past, he spoke the repentance and confession buried at the bottom of his heart for a lifetime, yet never able to be delivered. "I'm sorry. And I love you." Voice falling, his outstretched hand dropped weakly. Head tilted gently to one side, leaning on the cold well curb covered with withered vines. The corner of his mouth actually carried a strange and complex smile, like relief or like finally seeing release. The light of the 7 stars gradually faded, night sky returning to normal. Early the next morning, the hourly worker found Miles Payne didn't wake up as usual. Searching the backyard, she saw he was already sitting stiffly by the well, body cold, breathing long gone. In his hand, he tightly grasped that dull jade pendant. No matter how others tried, they couldn't pry it open. The news reported the passing of this once powerful business giant with a brief article, the title carrying a trace of sigh. Former head of Payne Group Miles Payne passed away last night. Unmarried for life, no children, legendary and lonely life ended. His life began with a wrong encounter and ended with a hopeless vigil. Like a star sinking into the sea, silent evermore. All love, hate, obsession, regret, and persistence, with his departure, turned into a negligible speck of dust in the river of time.